There are certain nights when the human heart becomes very quiet. This does not happen because love has disappeared from your life. It happens because your heart is waiting in total silence, hoping that it will not be wrongly understood by the world. If these exact words somehow manage to find you today, it might mean a part of your soul is already very tired. You are exhausted from pretending that you no longer care about what was lost. At the same time, another part of you still secretly hopes that someone somewhere is holding on to you just as strongly as you are holding on to them. The deepest truth of human relationships is that someone loves you more deeply than you can currently realize. They do not love you in the loud and dramatic way that movies always try to show. This love does not show up through perfect timing or through flawless words spoken at the right moment. Instead, it shows up through hesitation, it shows up through emotional confusion, it shows up through a painful distance that actually hides fear instead of a lack of interest. Before you completely convince yourself to walk away forever, you need to understand something that most people discover much too late in life. Some hearts do not stop loving you when they become silent. Sometimes that silence is simply the very last defense of a soul that is terrified of losing what it cannot fully express in words. Human beings are incredibly strange when it comes to the matter of love, especially when that love becomes completely real. We spend our entire lives believing that we want a deep emotional connection with another person. Yet, the moment someone truly touches the hidden private parts of us, a deep fear begins to awaken inside our minds. The psychologist Carl Jung once spoke about the human unconscious mind as if it were a hidden ocean buried beneath all human behavior. When someone genuinely loves you, they do not merely touch your surface personality. They accidentally awaken the abandoned pieces of your past that have been buried deep underneath everything else. When this reality of silent love touches your heart, you begin to see that you share this quiet struggle with many others who are looking for answers. It brings up your deepest insecurities, your unmet childhood needs, your inner loneliness, and your intense longing to finally be chosen without any conditions attached. That kind of profound connection changes people from the inside out. It shakes them internally to their very core. It exposes emotional wounds that they spent many years successfully hiding from themselves. This is the exact reason why someone can deeply love you and still pull away at the very moment you need their reassurance the most. It feels completely contradictory to your logical mind, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense. Love is not only warmth and comfort. Love is also total exposure. Love is complete vulnerability. It means standing entirely naked in front of another human being, simply hoping that they will not use your deep tenderness against you. The sad reality is that many people were never taught how to survive emotional intimacy. They never learned how to handle closeness. Instead, they learned how to survive disappointment. They learned how to appear strong to the outside world. They learned how to suppress their truest emotions so they would not get hurt. They learned how to build walls, but they never learned how to safely receive love without feeling a sense of terror. So when this person became deeply emotionally attached to you, something inside their mind began changing in ways they could not fully explain to you or to themselves. Your mere presence started heavily affecting their emotional state. Your silence suddenly mattered more than anything else. Your daily attention became the thing that regulated their emotions. Your absence became much heavier than they ever expected it to be. All of this terrified them to their core. Once someone gains the immense power to emotionally affect your inner world, your subconscious mind immediately recognizes a massive risk. Suddenly, the idea of losing them becomes a real possibility. Suddenly, your old abandonment fears feel completely imaginable again. Suddenly, your carefully protected independence no longer feels safe. Many people completely confuse emotional distance with a lack of love. But very often, emotional distance is actually the ultimate evidence of deep emotional overwhelm. There are certainly people who become cold because they truly do not care about you, but there are many others who become distant because they care too much. The second type of person is much harder to understand because their outward behavior completely contradicts their inward emotions. Their heart naturally moves toward you while their fear simultaneously pulls them away. One part of them desperately wants closeness, while another part whispers a warning about how this might end badly, just like everything else ended before. Without even realizing what they are doing, they begin protecting themselves from a pain that has not even happened yet. Perhaps you have already felt this painful contradiction yourself. You have experienced the strange inconsistency, the warm emotional connection followed by sudden silence, and the way they look at you when they think you are not paying attention. You notice the way they remember the smallest things about you without any effort, and the heavy emotional tension that exists even in your most ordinary conversations. Yet, despite all of this, something still feels completely blocked between you. Something feels entirely unfinished. It is almost as if their soul keeps leaning directly toward you, while their rational mind keeps taking a step backward. This is exactly what unresolved emotional wounds look like in real life. People often imagine trauma as a form of dramatic destruction, but most emotional wounds are much quieter than that. They hide quietly inside attachment patterns. They hide inside a deep fear of vulnerability. They hide inside sudden emotional withdrawal. Some people disappear emotionally the very moment they start caring deeply about you. This happens because closeness unconsciously reminds them of a severe pain they never truly healed from in their past. Perhaps they once loved someone who abandoned them when they needed them most. Perhaps they learned as young children that expressing their emotions always led to rejection or shame. Perhaps vulnerability once humiliated them so deeply that now their entire nervous system treats intimacy as a physical danger. The most heartbreaking part of this dynamic is that they may not even consciously understand why they are acting this way. The subconscious mind controls far more of our daily behavior than most people realize. You might find yourself still waiting for a sign, holding on to someone who went completely quiet while you still feel in your gut that they love you. A person can genuinely love you while simultaneously sabotaging the connection. They do this because internally their nervous system associates love with massive emotional risk. They want closeness, but that closeness activates their deepest fear. They crave intimacy, but that intimacy awakens a terrifying vulnerability. So they begin sending confusing mixed signals without even understanding their own actions. This is why an emotionally mature love requires patience far more than it requires passion. Passion is very easy. Anyone can desire someone intensely for a brief moment. But true love asks something much harder from human beings. It asks them to remove their emotional armor piece by piece. It asks them to trust another person again after experiencing massive disappointment. It asks them to remain emotionally open despite facing complete uncertainty. For many people, that opening process feels entirely terrifying. They have spent too many years building their whole identity around emotional self-protection. You must also understand something very important about the nature of silence. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is a sign of deep emotional processing happening just beneath the surface. Some people are able to speak their emotions immediately as they feel them. Others disappear inwardly when their emotions become too strong to handle. They retreat into deep thought, into confusion, and into a state of intense internal conflict. This is especially true for people who have spent their entire lives suppressing their vulnerability. For them, silence is not a form of punishment directed at you. Sometimes, their silence is simply a mechanism for emotional survival. However, this creates incredibly painful misunderstandings in relationships. One person interprets the silence as a form of total rejection, while the other person experiences that same silence as a form of self-protection. One person feels completely abandoned, while the other person feels entirely emotionally overwhelmed. Slowly, two people who deeply care for each other begin to drift apart into the distance. This does not happen because their love disappeared. It happens because their fear became much louder than their communication. This is the exact point where many people choose to give up much too early. They mistake emotional complexity for an emotional absence. They assume that love should always look completely obvious, perfectly consistent, and entirely easy. But psychologically profound connections are rarely simple. They naturally activate the deepest layers of human identity. They force people to confront their shadow selves. They bring forward the insecure, wounded, and frightened parts that are normally hidden beneath a veneer of confidence and pride. Carl Jung believed that real love often becomes a mirror for us. It is not just a source of daily comfort, but a direct reflection of our unresolved self. This is why certain connections feel so spiritually intense to experience. They force an emotional awakening within us. They reveal toxic or repetitive patterns that you never noticed before in your life. They expose your own fear of abandonment, your personal tendency to overgive to others, your hidden fear of being completely unworthy, your desperate need for constant reassurance, and your deepest pockets of loneliness. Suddenly, another human being unknowingly becomes connected to parts of your identity that you did not realize were still deeply wounded. This person who has pulled away from you may be experiencing the exact same internal chaos right now. They may lie awake at night replaying every single conversation they ever had with you while pretending during the day that everything is completely normal. If you look closely at how the mind protects itself, you can reveal the hidden psychology behind why they choose to pull away. They may fight a constant daily urge to send you a message because their emotional pride keeps interfering with their desires. They may miss you deeply with every breath while simultaneously convincing themselves that keeping a safe distance is absolutely necessary for survival. Perhaps the saddest part of human psychology is that people often hurt the ones they love the most. They do this because those are the only people who are truly capable of hurting them back. That realization changes absolutely everything when you begin seeing people through a psychological lens instead of a purely emotional one. Suddenly, you stop interpreting every confusing behavior as a definitive lack of love. You begin recognizing the complex emotional defense mechanisms hidden beneath their daily actions. You see the delayed replies, the sudden emotional inconsistency, the painful moments of withdrawal immediately after a moment of intimacy, and the deep fear hidden inside their emotional restraint. None of these defensive behaviors are healthy when they are left unresolved over a long period of time, but they are deeply human. Experiencing this complexity can open your eyes to the deeper realities of the human heart. Not every emotionally distant person is emotionally empty. Sometimes the people who are the hardest to reach are the ones who are loving you with everything they have left, from behind the safety of their quiet walls. Some people are simply emotionally exhausted from surviving life with a heavily guarded heart. There are people walking around us every single day, carrying years of silent grief that nobody else ever noticed. These are the people who learn to appear completely emotionally independent because depending on others in their past once entirely destroyed them. They are the people who secretly crave human tenderness but panic the moment they actually receive it on a consistent basis. They have forgotten how to trust a calm and stable love because emotional chaos became the only thing familiar to them. If this person truly loves you, their internal battle may be much deeper than you can currently see with your eyes. But there is another side to this difficult truth that you absolutely must not ignore. Love alone is never enough without genuine emotional growth. You cannot save someone from their own unconscious patterns if they completely refuse to confront themselves. You cannot endlessly sacrifice your own emotional well-being while hoping that your love will magically heal another person's deep fear. Real connection requires mutual emotional responsibility from both sides. Compassion matters immensely, yes, but so does basic self-respect. Understanding someone's deep psychological wounds should never require you to abandon your own emotional needs entirely. This is the exact place where emotional maturity becomes absolutely essential. Emotionally mature love does not beg for crumbs of affection. It does not destroy its own well-being trying to prove its worthiness to someone else. It does not chase another person endlessly while completely neglecting its own dignity. Mature love understands how to practice patience without falling into self-abandonment. It creates a safe space for the other person without disappearing emotionally in the process. It allows for deep compassion without losing its own firm boundaries. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can offer is not forcing a connection, but allowing someone the necessary emotional space to confront themselves honestly. Transformation cannot be controlled or forced from the outside world. A person changes only when their own soul becomes completely tired of repeating the exact same painful emotional cycles. Perhaps this confusing connection entered your life not only to give you love, but to awaken you psychologically. It might have arrived to teach you the true difference between an anxious attachment and a genuine emotional alignment. It came to show you how deeply you actually crave true emotional reciprocity. It was meant to force you to confront the ways you have ignored your own strong intuition out of a desperate fear of losing someone. Think very carefully about this reality. Have there been specific moments when your intuition quietly whispered the truth to you long before your rational mind accepted it? Have there been moments where you could clearly sense their real feelings hidden beneath their spoken words? Human beings are far more intuitive than they ever realize. The subconscious mind constantly reads emotional energy, subtle body language, sudden emotional shifts, complex silence patterns, direct eye contact, and hidden nervous tension. Long before your logic finally catches up, your soul often already knows the truth. That is the exact reason why certain people remain completely emotionally unforgettable to us. It is not because they were perfect partners, but because they emotionally awakened something that was sleeping deep inside you. That awakening is rarely comfortable. Sometimes awakening arrives through a deep longing, through complete confusion, or through an emotional distance that forces inner reflection. It can happen through missing someone so deeply that you finally confront the true loneliness you were hiding from for years. Pain has a very strange psychological function. It strips away all of our illusions. It exposes the raw emotional truth. It reveals exactly where healing is still desperately needed inside us. This is why some relationships completely transform your inner world even when they never manage to become fully stable on the outside. They force personal growth. They force deep awareness. They force emotional evolution. Perhaps this person is currently standing at the very edge of that exact transformation themselves. Maybe they are slowly realizing that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it once did. Maybe your complete absence has finally forced them to confront the heavy feelings they tried so hard to suppress. Maybe they are beginning to understand that real love cannot survive forever inside total silence and rigid pride. Eventually, every single human being reaches a moment where their internal loneliness becomes much heavier than the fear of vulnerability. When that critical moment finally arrives, people begin changing. They do not change instantly, and they do not change perfectly, but they change gradually. They begin recognizing the thick emotional walls they built around themselves. They start noticing how often fear controlled their daily decisions. They realize how many beautiful opportunities for genuine connection they sabotaged just trying to protect themselves from potential pain. For the very first time, they begin understanding that true emotional safety cannot exist without real emotional openness. This realization is completely life-changing. But while they navigate their own difficult awakening, you must continue navigating yours. Do not allow their current uncertainty to destroy your own sense of self-worth. Do not let another person's emotional confusion convince you that you are somehow difficult to love. The exact way someone responds to deep intimacy often reflects their relationship with themselves far more than it reflects your true value as a human being. Many emotionally unavailable people are not withholding love because you are unworthy of it. They are withholding it because they themselves are completely terrified. They are terrified of needing someone else. They are terrified of emotional dependency, terrified of sudden rejection, terrified of losing absolute control, and terrified of being emotionally seen too clearly by another soul. Ironically, the more deeply they love you, the more vulnerable they feel. This creates a massive internal contradiction. They crave closeness while resisting it simultaneously. Unless they consciously choose to heal, they remain permanently trapped between desire and fear. But you cannot carry the heavy emotional burden for both souls. You can love someone deeply and still choose your own emotional balance. You can understand someone psychologically without excusing their endless emotional inconsistency. Compassion should never become a form of slow self-destruction. This is one of the most important lessons that emotionally awakened people eventually learn in life. Love should always expand your spirit, not slowly erase who you are. Yet, despite all of this immense complexity, there are still connections that are truly worth fighting for. There are rare connections where two souls gradually learn each other's deepest fears with tenderness instead of harsh judgment. There are connections where emotional walls slowly soften over a long period of time. There are connections where both people actively choose personal healing instead of feeding their own ego. These beautiful relationships do exist, but they require complete honesty, real accountability, deep vulnerability, immense patience, and true emotional courage. Most importantly, they require two people who are fully willing to stop running away from themselves. Every single relationship eventually becomes a direct confrontation with the self. You cannot truly love another person while remaining completely disconnected from your own emotional truth. That is exactly why shadow work matters so much. Shadow work is not simply trendy spiritual language. Psychologically, it means facing the hidden parts of yourself with absolute honesty. It means looking at the jealousy you deny, the fear you hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the emotional patterns you repeat unconsciously, and the old wounds you pretend no longer affect your daily life. Until people finally confront these hidden layers, their relationships will continue repeating the exact same pain in different forms. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face their own shadow, specifically because of you. Perhaps your love became too real for them to ignore, too emotionally honest, and too psychologically awakening. Even if they have not fully figured themselves out yet, something deep inside them knows that your connection truly matters. Human beings do not emotionally struggle this deeply over people who mean absolutely nothing to them. Real emotional conflict only exists where a genuine attachment exists. That is why indifference feels cold and simple, while real love feels complicated and emotionally alive. If someone truly does not care about you, their energy becomes emotionally flat and empty. But when someone deeply loves you while actively battling their own inner fear, their energy becomes highly inconsistent, emotionally charged, confusing, and intense. You can feel their internal conflict even when words are completely absent from the conversation. You have probably already sensed this truth yourself. You feel the emotional pull, the unfinished feeling, and the strange intuitive knowing that beneath all the cold silence, something incredibly real still exists. You have likely questioned yourself repeatedly because of it. Maybe a part of you keeps wondering if you are just imagining these things. But deep emotional intuition rarely appears without a valid reason. The human subconscious mind constantly perceives emotional truths that are completely hidden beneath surface behavior. Still, you must balance your intuition with practical wisdom. Do not romanticize emotional suffering endlessly. Do not become addicted to emotional uncertainty simply because the intensity makes you feel alive. Some people stay trapped in painful dynamics because that emotional unpredictability creates a real psychological addiction. The nervous system easily becomes attached to the constant emotional highs and lows of an unstable relationship. Calm love can initially feel unfamiliar or even boring after you have experienced a chaotic attachment style. This is why true healing completely changes your attraction patterns. Emotionally healed people no longer chase emotional confusion just to feel something. They begin deeply valuing consistency, emotional safety, total honesty, and genuine peace. They stop interpreting emotional unavailability as a sign of mysterious depth. They stop trying to earn love through suffering and pain. Perhaps this entire painful experience is slowly guiding you toward that exact realization too. Sometimes the universe does not send someone into your life merely to complete you or make you happy. Sometimes it sends them to completely transform you, to awaken your high standards, to strengthen your emotional awareness, and to teach you that your heart deserves true reciprocity, not emotional guessing games forever. At the same time, real transformation takes a lot of time for everyone involved. If this person truly loves you, they may currently be fighting massive battles inside themselves that nobody else can see. They are fighting battles between old childhood wounds and new hope, between deep fear and intense desire, and between self-protection and complete emotional surrender. Right now, they might be standing alone somewhere, replaying the sound of your voice in their mind, wondering whether it is already too late to reach out for you honestly. The human heart always carries the weight of regret much more heavily than the fear of rejection.